we lived in an age from like 2016 to 2019 where creative, the impact that it had on the ad account versus the media buying strategy was less important. And I think a lot of it had to do with just general CPMs, general competition across the platform, right? And as more competition enters the landscape, as creative gets better and better, then the cost of advertising goes up. And then it's more and more important each day to have better creative.
Hi everyone, I'm Reza, and today I'm joined by Kyle Lawrence, who is the Director of Acquisition at Cuts Clothing. Thanks for joining us today, Kyle.
Thanks, Reza. Appreciate it. Yeah, so like you said, Kyle Lawrence here, Director of Acquisition at Cuts Clothing, which basically means I run all things advertising here at Cuts, from Facebook ads, Google ads, across all paid social channels. We've got our hands in podcasting. We're investing in TV as well. So excited to have the conversation with you about Facebook.
Yeah, appreciate you jumping on. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about, and we've talked about this in the past a little bit, so I think it'd be great for people to learn about it, is if you can talk a little about the creative process that you have set up at Cuts. So like everything from how do the creatives get made, how do you coordinate with the creative team around what to produce next? Like you mentioned, you have like an Asana set up where you put briefs and experiment backlog and all of those sort of things. If you can give like an overview of what that workflow looks like in your team, that would be a great place to kick off.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so at Cuts, we're blessed to have an in-house content team. So everything that you may have seen already from Cuts has pretty much been produced by our in-house team, which is led by two amazing guys, Liam and Brennan. And so to back out for a second, our brainstorming starts each month, and we map out typically one acquisition-focused shoot per month. And so we come together as a team, and we have a creative brainstorming meeting that we call Food and Fire. And Food and Fire means we come together, have a creative brainstorm over lunch, basically. And we pool all of our ideas. I lead that meeting, and it's pretty structured. People have homework so that everyone is prepared with their ideas, and it's not you're not caught off guard. And we'll gather ideas, we'll ICE score them, which stands for impact, confidence, and ease. And based off that scoring, we'll move forward with 2 or 3 ideas, and then we go shoot those ideas in our next acquisition shoot. So while that's happening, once those ads are created, built, and ready to go for advertising across any of our channels, for this case, we'll talk about Facebook, those are then deployed, and we have an experiment tracker built into a program called Airtable, which is similar to Asana or just a typical project management system. And that's where we track our ideas, and then we categorize them based off their current state. So if it's just an idea that's a backlog, it'll be backlogged. If it's active, then we'll consider it active. And then if it's currently in experiment, which means that there's enough data behind it in the ad account that we consider it statistically significant, and we'll start to report results on that. So that's where, when I worked in an agency or in any of my other previous positions, being able to track active experiments and then report on them, you get really lost in the sauce, and you've tested 10, 15 different ideas, and you have no idea what's actually working and how to make iterations off of that. You may have an idea, but at the end of the day, if someone were to ask you, like, hey, can you show me your scientific experiment across this ad, it'd be really hard to show that. So we found this process valuable, and Motion has a huge impact on that because it's the quickest way that we can access creative reporting. And so as you know, I mean, Facebook's dashboard and UX has been a disaster forever. It's gotten a little bit better over time, but Motion has helped us and our team to be able to build customer reports, be able to access the data quicker, and customize the experiment and tailor it to the way that Cuts wants to have it.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Could you talk about how do decisions get made, right? So when you bring different members of the team together, there's brainstorming, there's different ideas. especially when you're looking at some data from previous experiments and you're trying to come together to make a decision around the new direction? Like, how does the final decision get made? Is it a collaborative process? Does like the media buying team have the final say on it? Does the creative team do? Like, how do the decisions get made?
Great question. So we have a common saying here at Cuts that best idea always wins. So there are obviously certain positions and certain people who have more power than others, depending on their positional title or how long they've been here at Cuts. But at the end of the day, the best idea is going to win. So that process that I described, where we gather all of our ideas, and then as a team, we prioritize them based off impact, the confidence that we have in that particular initiative actually being able to be accomplished, and then how easy is it based off, okay, can we have this done by the end of the week based off the priority, or is it going to be 2-3 months out? If someone's idea, let's just say, it was like, hey, I think we need to do a TV commercial, it might make a huge impact. We might be really confident with it, but it's going to be really hard to get that done in a short period of time. So I lead the meeting and walk people through the ICE scoring. So the scoring itself tells us which idea to move forward on. But it does then need to be, like, as far as design, aesthetic, how it's produced, that's up to our content director and content producer.
Got it. Great. And one of the things we've seen in the last few years is, as Facebook specifically as a channel has matured, there's been a lot of talk about creative, and obviously creative's always been important, but there seems to be something different happening in the last few years where the topic of creative is bubbling up to like the top of the priority list when people think of the importance of it in media buying. I'm curious, do you agree with that? Do you sense that that's happening? And how do you think that impacts the role of a media buyer? To what extent is the media buyer now like involved in the creative process? How would you describe the role of a media buyer in 2021?
Yeah, so creative's always been important, but particular to media buying, we lived in an age from like 2016 to 2019 where creative, the impact that it had on the ad account versus the media buying strategy was less important. And I think a lot of it had to do with just general CPMs, general competition across the platform, right? And as more competition enters the landscape, as creative gets better and better, then the cost of advertising goes up. And then it's more and more important each day to have better creative as it gets more competitive. So that's my position on it. I think with the variety of different placements out there, from feed to Instagram story to now Reels that got launched today to right column, the original ad placement, every placement is unique and has and it behaves differently. And what I mean by that is, someone who's scrolling through Instagram story has a different experience on the platform than someone going through their feed and etc. So it's more important than ever to also design specifically for the placement itself, where we know 70+%, I might have my numbers wrong, listen to IG stories with sound on versus feed sound off. So, UGC testimonials, people talking to camera will perform better in Instagram story versus feed. So there's also now more pressure on how you do creative by placement versus just creative needs to be better, and it's more important.
Got it. And what impact does that have on the role of a media buyer? So like obviously the creative team has a lot more work to do, a lot of different formats to create, and a lot more volume to put out. How does this like evolution of creative within the role of media buying, how does that impact the role of a media buyer in your opinion?
Yeah, good question. So, at the end of the day too, to be able to track this, you have to customize your naming convention if something's important to you. So if I'm running testimonial ads or an influencer is talking to camera, in order for me to be able to track that, I have to put that language into my naming convention. So at Cuts, in our naming convention, we put, testimonial or talking to camera as language in our naming convention so that our media buyers can then track it. And then we can then go and build custom reporting. So when I ask them, hey, can you pull a report for testimonials and split it out by placement to see what placement's performing best? Not to tell him that, hey, we're only going to run testimonials in IG story, but I want to be able to know, does sound on testimonials perform better across which placement? So I think it's becomes more difficult for media buyers because they're going to have to be looking at breakdowns more often and understanding what types of creative work best in different parts of the funnel, different parts of the Facebook family of apps. So it definitely creates more work, but there's definitely tools in place to mitigate that.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you mentioned a little earlier where you'd come together, put together a few ideas around creatives that you want to produce, can you describe the process from like making those decisions to when the creative team then sends those finished creatives to the media buying team? Is there some steps in between where there's like a round of feedback and like, you know, a V1 of the ad and there's like some back and forth in the creation of those ads, or how does it look like for your team?
Yeah, so coming out of that meeting, an example would be we just had a Pima Cotton launch and we identified a direction that we wanted to move with that particular concept. Then our content team would create a treatment for it, which basically means the look and feel of that ad concept. And then we meet and agree on that. There might be some changes within that meeting, and then they go and shoot it.
And the treatment is on a doc, like these are just words, or something else?
Yeah, so it's usually within a PowerPoint or a doc. And then our marketing team finalizes that. Then after that, we plan the shoot, hire the models, make sure all of our production team is ready to go. And then at the shoot, there's usually one or two people from our acquisition team on set. And so one thing that we've noticed is a lot of, iPhone only videos perform best on platform. Makes sense because it's most native to how people behave on Instagram, right? So we have our, high production cameras, but then we need someone there also shooting behind the scenes or on iPhone, the same shot, just on an iPhone. So, and then we also need someone who's specifically calling specific shots out that we need for ads. So generally we'll shoot like an overall story that can be used across our website, email, as well as advertising. But then there's some very specific shots that we need for ads. So sometimes we'll have, a model talk to camera and talk about how much they love the shirt versus you probably wouldn't do that for, the homepage hero banner. You could, but it's just not a priority for that particular medium. So that's shoot date. Then once shoot date happens, our content team goes into post-production. And that's where myself and the media buyer will then brief out typically 5 to 7 concepts, focusing on a single value proposition or a particular messaging angle that we want to focus on within this campaign.
Cool. That's awesome. Quite an elaborate process. Really cool to hear about. And to wrap up, wanted to touch a little bit more about motion. You described where it fits in your creative process. Can you talk about the kinds of reports that you created in motion? So assume that the people listening are in motion and they're trying to figure out what kind of reports to create themselves. Can you describe some of how you use it in detail and the kind of reports that your team has made?
So we've got about 4 or 5 different reports going in motion. And the core reason that we use motion is to have our designers and our content team to be able to go in easily and pull reports specific to them. So I think that the two most important reports we have are very simple. We have a video report and we have a still image report. And so we have a graphic designer that owns all static still imagery, and we have a video production team that owns all video. And so video, we've got our ADA report, which most people should be aware of, but it's attention, interest, desire, and action. And for him, it's less about return on ad spend and it's less about the conversion rate and average order value, but I want to know ad effectiveness. So that's everything that happens before the user gets to the website, right? And so he's looking at, watch time, overall attention rate, click-through rate, and it pretty much stops there. Once the click happens, I don't really want him to care too much about it. So that's the video report that one of our guys owns. A couple of more customizable ones are we split our ad account between whitelisting and non-white listings. So we want to be able to understand, does running ads through an influencer's page, is that more effective than running through Cuts page? And so there's a couple other scenarios there that we test. We'll also, in our naming convention, we'll have the model's name in the naming convention, so we can actually test to see what models we use are most effective. So those are a few examples that we get pretty granular in our naming convention, which allows us to be able to test and pull certain reports in motion, which is really helpful.
Awesome. And my last question is just on the naming convention. So it's no surprise to a lot of motion users that like one of the biggest limitations to being able to get a lot of value out of the tool and just creative analysis in general is doing really great naming conventions. And I have to say, probably the Cuts team has like the top 1 or 2% naming conventions I've seen. So it's really, really well done. I'm curious, how do you keep that discipline? Because it can be difficult to ensure that everybody uses the same thing. And sometimes you just want to fly through the account and make changes. So a lot of people struggle with getting the right system and discipline in place to implement naming conventions well. How did you guys do it? Do you have any tips on how teams can implement that well?
Yeah, it's definitely tough, and it takes a lot of discipline. We have an ad naming sheet, which computes the name for you. So based off a few drop-down selections that we have it be pre-populated, so then they can just copy and paste what that sheet creates into the actual ad build. And so that makes it easy. And then over time, the media buyer picks up on the naming convention, can copy and paste, and it just becomes more intuitive over time.
Perfect. Great. Well, Motion's also created a spreadsheet naming generator, which I'll link below to everybody who's listening could get something like what Kyle is describing here. And Kyle, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the overview. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, appreciate all the questions, Reza, anytime. They can find me online on Twitter at Kyle Lawrence or email me, my name at cutsclothing.com. Happy to answer any questions that you guys may have with the creative process or how to leverage motion for your guys' success.
Perfect. Thanks, Kyle. Have a great day.
See ya.